Hi all, there was a very exciting game in candidates just played yesterday from the time of this video, 20th of March 2016. Fabiano Caruana playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Could Nakamura come back in this tournament? He had defeated Topalov the round before, so was he on a way to a comeback? Fabiano kicked off with E4, we saw E5 going into a royal pairs, and now the Berlin defense, which is free knight f6, has a very solid reputation. Berlin defense. We have a popular move emerging quite popular recently, d3. The most usual move in the past historically has been castling or knight c3, but d3 is getting quite popular. Bishop c5, and now white doubled the pawns and played knight bd2. Black castled. Queen e2. And black now defends his e-pawn. Needs to defend it. The main moves bishop d6 or knight d7. Well, these have been seen before in this position. Rook e8 was played, defending the e-pawn. Now knight c4, and black is defending the e-pawn again with knight d7, and then we have bishop d2, and white is preparing to castle queenside potentially, has the flexibility to do that. Bishop d6, and yes, white castles queenside. This has been played recently, a similar plan by WhiteElo. Yeah, that was a very interesting attacking game. So is this a new anti-Berlin approach? Double the pawns, prepare to castle queenside. What would be in white's favour here? It's very interesting. Black uses a tempo gainer. It seems quite lucrative to play b5, gaining a tempo on the knight. So surely black can just go for a direct attack here. Isn't that the best thing? It's interesting, this race scenario, because it seems here that black is ahead in the race. If he can establish pawns on like this and then b3, it looks very thematic and very aggressive. So a5 was played. Is there a method to white's madness? Knight f5. And here, there is a slight snag with black's attacking speed in this position, and it's actually quite a subtle element to consider, which might make castling queenside an attractive new template plan against the Berlin defense. If we consider the double pawns here, white's not going to trying to win an endgame here with the double pawns, but in the middle game, where both sides are trying to get to each other's king, a very exciting position, the queen is hemmed in here, can't go to this diagonal, and that could be useful sometimes for the queen to go onto that diagonal. And in fact, this is a key point here, that after a4, yes, it seems white's being visited a lot earlier than black, but white plays now bishop g5, and you'll see that the queen can't flee because of that pawn there. Can't flee. And it's not ideal, this position. e7 is controlled here masterfully. There's no bishop retreat without losing the exchange. Black doesn't want to go particularly into a self-pin with knight f6. So Hikaru Nakamura makes a concession move, f6. And this has implications for the attack race, the speed of both sides' attack, because this pawn is an actual target. Provoking this pawn forward, you can see that g4, g5 later will aim to shred open that g file. So this is a target, and white has not got any similar analogous pawn target. So he retreats the bishop, and it looks as though, yeah, black's visiting first there. White's king. We see knight c5. Maybe now bishop takes f5 is interesting with e4 potentially. But white's always got this d file, that's the thing, and any d takes also opens up the queen on this diagonal potentially. At the moment b5 is covering it. But these are things to bear in mind. But g4, dual purpose, supports the knight in any case, and then also supports, of course, g5 using this leverage of this target pawn, this f6 pawn. But for the moment, it seems again that black's attack is visiting white's king first. Surely, after bishop e6, doesn't this look dangerous? King b1. And then we have two pawns menacingly poised after b4 for either a3 or b3. What's going to be more effective? The problem with b4, it has released a bit of control of c4. So those variations with bishop takes and e4, they don't work so well because of d takes, and we use that check diagonal. So there's that to bear in mind. It's actually made this a lot more significant, that e takes is a lot more possible. Now, white carries on with g5. And yes, who's winning this race now? Very tricky position indeed. Very, very tricky. Perhaps from a theoretical perspective, black's best chance here would have been to take on f5 and not try and open up lines with a3 so much as we can c3, so a3, and then try and play for e4 to try and get an aggressive knight pointing at c3. This is an interesting idea for this kind of fork. For example, d takes, knight takes, and we have lines like this, but they still seem to be good, well, potentially good for white, but this could be very resourcefully played by black here in this position, and it looks scary to allow this sort of thing, but this could be about equal potentially, this kind of thing here. It looks really kind of scary. If this really is the way black should play the position, it's very interesting. It doesn't seem to be about line opening so much as exploiting like the c3 square. Let's get an engine evaluation on this particular position. After rook takes f5, it's given as equal actually, but it's crazy stuff. Giving up the c6 pawn. This is completely crazy line, and slightly intuitive for what we think about when attacking the opponent's king on both sides of the board. We're rewriting the rule book here. Doesn't it seem, I'm going to turn this off now, doesn't it seem more natural what Nakamura played here? Sort of bishop takes. He played b3. There's other crazy stuff, by the way, which you know, black doesn't really want to get involved with. Black doesn't want to open up the g file. It's just asking to be slaughtered. For example, like this, queen f6, we see knight takes g7 as a slaughter scenario. And then if king takes, yeah, we're shredding the king. We can play knight takes h7 here, with queen having access to h5. This would be pretty terminal, for example. Or if queen takes g7, then this is threatening this discovering attack on the queen. And so this is sufficient to just play knight takes e6 here, crushing. Yeah, a crushing position indeed. Okay, so yeah, f takes g5 isn't very attractive in a nutshell. We see b3, and it seems a fairly logical move to play b3, but is it good? Does it actually work in this particular position? Remember the particular nuance of the position, black's queen can't use this diagonal. There's leverage to open up the g file. We see rook hg1, yeah, simply threatening to just rip open that g file. B takes a2 check was played. There's crazy stuff which might be an improvement, but you'd have to be an engine to play it in g6. For example, check. This looks terrifying for black, where this diagonal is being torn to shreds. But apparently there's an amazing idea here with the king still on b1 and the queen here to sack bishop, and then black, if would actually potentially be better here with knight c3 check, mating white. This is just crazy stuff and shows some of the dangers of the position. Yeah. So yeah, g6 is very interesting, this line, but white's not obliged to play d4 here. This is a very, very sharp line. White's not even obliged to play that. Perhaps white could consider touching a pawn in this particular position with a3. It's just a really, really sharp position. But it shows, yeah, g6 it's crazy idea. Just to leave the king basically on b1 for this latent kind of invisible tactical idea. Might be an improvement. Might be. So anyway, b takes a2, moves the king to a1. So there's no such tactics with the c3 square. We see bishop takes f5 here. E takes a3, but the lines are kept closed. b3. Knight e6, as though knight b4 is going to be a major nuisance of some sort. But this is actually prevented. I mean, the might even reroute to d5 after. It's prevented, just c3. Bishop f8. You might think in this position, by the way, why not exploit the weakness of the last move? Why not attack b3? White has a strong move d4, opening up an attack on the knight. Queen c4 check actually indirectly defends b3. So it's pretty pointless actually to play rook b3. That creates a weakness of the last move itself on this diagonal. So bishop f8. We see knight d2. F takes g. Black decides when to open that line up. Semi-open file for white. Knight c5. It looks as though d3 might be an issue, but here, yeah, black with a black rook staring at the white queen. This is an ingenious move is played in this position. Rook g3. And both ways that black can take this pawn, they're not particularly hot. If knight takes d3, knight e4, and the knight's stranded with that horrible pin, end of game. And on queen takes, this is an interesting sequence here where the knight can't go back really, and if knight f4, well, we've got knight f6 check as well to factor in. If knight b2 hitting the rook, then this is really good, just building up the pressure. And this scenario is just too strong. This knight's not really helping black's attacking possibilities. This is just crushing for white. Things like f7 check now on the cards from Kha7. Yeah, so it's poison pawn. It wasn't taken. e4 was played. And this is pretty desperate stuff after bishop takes c5. There's no intermediate move, as you might expect. If e takes queen g4, looking at g7, so the bishop can recapture here. So that doesn't exist as a move. We have bishop takes, knight takes e4. It's kind of strategically over. It's such a fantastic knight on e4. Bishop d6. The rook does budge, and it makes way for queen h5 now to hit h7. Bishop e5. There is a threat of bishop takes c3 check here because of the pinned knight. That's dealt with d4. Bishop goes back. Now rook g1 ties down the queen to support knight f6, queen f6, but also queen h5 is on the cards, potentially. Not necessarily, but in some circumstances it's going to be on the cards. We see rook b8, and now white takes the time to just take on a2. Yeah. Just safeguarding b3. There's no queen d5 here because knight takes f6 check. Would win the queen. It's a really desperate position for black. His attack is just non-existent. Bishop h4, trying to play for queen d5. It's a pretty desperate idea. Rook gg4. Queen d5. I mean, what else? If the bishop goes back, it's just a hopeless position. For example, check. And queen f7 is really crushing. There's lots of really crushing ideas here in this position. For example, rook g6 is on the way. If we look at this position just for a moment, in fact, you'll see that black cannot really defend. What's the threat, you might think? Well, if queen d5, rook takes h7 check, knight takes f6, and then that's mating. So how does black actually defend? If he doesn't move his queen, let's give a token move. Rook g6 is actually mating 4. It just shows white's attack's really broken through. Just to show this in this position. Rook takes h7 here, for example. Rook h6 is a nice move for queen g6. Yeah, if the attack's just broken through to black's king, really, it's all over. So this is pretty desperate. It's like equivalent to resignation. c4 with the bishop hanging now. The rook's still protecting the knight. So in this position, if Nakamura resigned, if he played on like here, okay, there's a mold idea of queen b2 if the queen ever moves, but no, just rook g takes h4. And if rook takes e4, we take with the rook, not with the queen. So we're defending b2. That's just totally over, basically. Yeah, so queen d5, c4, it's over. And I have to say, I was completely shocked by the style of this game. I thought Fabiano Caruana was a positional kind of player, but he played like a real aggressive Tau-like game here, maybe influenced by the WhiteElo game recently. Maybe this is a new emerging trend to play against Berlin by just brutal, direct, opposite side castling game. It seemed the major factor for me was the double pawns. It made actually prompting for f6 a little bit easier because the queen was restricted. Once f6 was available, then White's got leverage to rip open that g file and show that his attack can be pretty quick. White was also ingenious in not touching the pawns as far as necessary to create any unnecessary levers. Black might have had a key improvement to play on the c3 square as the engines show, but it's kind of counterintuitive because usually the golden rule in opposite side castling games is to open up lines against the opponent's king, not use key squares, but maybe that's what needed to be done. Yeah, a shocking attacking game, which really is starting to look as though Nakamura is not in contention now for winning the tournament, unfortunately. So the American hope is with, of course, Caruana now, who's an American now. So that would be amazing if the World Championship did have Caruana against Magnus Carlsen. I mean, there's other great pairings as well, but that would be amazing as an outcome of this tournament. So let's see how Caruana is going to do in the next few rounds as well. But this was a really impressive attacking game. Yeah, it seems as though this is a very, very dangerous idea to play with White. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.